You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. What a fine show we have today. My guests include the young assistant district attorney who took special pains with the victim and used new techniques to prosecute a trafficking case right here in the U.S. in California. Then there's the author of and crusader for excellence in young people's literature, especially in building a greater library presence of books by and for Latinas. Last, two women who have done the first nationwide research into the stigma of abortion, how it works, and what we can do to change it. But first, we need to look inside the headlines. The headlines this week went from the ridiculous to the sublime being, of course, Nigeria, which we'll talk more about in Fighting Words at the end of the program. The ridiculous is that Monica Lewinsky is back. Yes. And although she is back claiming that she wants to now reclaim her life, her privacy, her adulthood, now that she's almost 40, she has come back in a way that isn't very private, in a major story in Vanity Fair with all the attendant publicity. And she's been doing other interviews. In the process of this, she has blamed the feminist movement and asked for an apology from the feminist movement because some feminists, she doesn't say some, she says all, but then of course she wouldn't notice the difference. Some feminists took his side and said that, and Hillary's side, and treated her as if she were a slut. Now, okay, I'm not for slut shaming. But the truth is that the feminist movement does not owe Monica Lewinsky an apology. First of all, those feminists who sided with Clinton did so because they were indeed concerned that his policies, which were feminist-friendly and good for women, through our pressure, might be endangered. She seems to think that we should have abandoned those policies, that it was more important to be for her. Other feminists, myself included, took the position that he was definitely to blame. She was not, even though she had said she was coming to the White House bringing knee pads, in other words, prepared to give blowjobs to anybody important. The power imbalance, even though it was consensual on both parts, the power imbalance overwhelmed everything. He was the most powerful man in the world. She was a 20-some-odd-year-old intern. And that's enough. That's all you need to say. And mostly we took a position of support and sympathy to Hillary Clinton. I find it nerve-wracking that she has decided to come back just when we are on the verge of having a campaign for the first woman president of the United States, and I'm not amused by that. At the very least, I would say she does not deserve an apology. A P.S. on Monica. For years, she lived in my neighborhood, and I was always running into her at the ATM machine at the bank. It was easy to spot because in her great seeking out of privacy, she was always wearing a T-shirt or sweatshirt and a baseball cap with, in very large letters, the word Monica L. emblazoned on them. In happier news, President Jimmy Carter has written an open letter to Amnesty International to the Secretary General Salil Shetty, and it came out of this program. I'm very proud. It was on this program a few weeks ago that Carter, being our first male guest, and as we discussed prostitution and trafficking and other issues, it was on this program that Carter first learned about Amnesty International's bizarre position of considering decriminalizing pimps and brothel owners and Johns. And he was very clear that he opposed that, both he and I, and the women's movement and survivors of prostitution all prefer the Nordic model, which would criminalize pimps and Johns as well as brothel keepers, but not the women who are the victims of this victimless crime. In short, however, I thought afterwards, although I'd been so surprised and glad that he'd made the offer to write a letter, an open letter, I thought afterwards, maybe that won't ever come to pass. But it did. The Carter Center followed up, asked for information, got information as well from Amnesty, did their due diligence, and he has written a wonderful letter, which you can find online, on Facebook, at the Carter Center and elsewhere, in which he says clearly he urges them not to adopt this proposed policy. And he says that the most important policy change would be to increase penalties for pimps and consumers and to decriminalize victims and survivors. He adds that the line between consensual and exploitative sex has become almost meaningless. And the Carter Center has decided to hold a conference next year on this issue. And I couldn't be prouder that Women's Media Center Live has been part of the catalyst and inspiration for that. If by chance you haven't had a moment to hear that interview yet, I do urge that you listen to it, because he says some remarkable things out of an astonishing consciousness for a guy. You can, of course, find it on iTunes or at WMClive.com. And now it's time for our first guest. Alexis Feigen Fasteau is an ADA, Assistant District Attorney, based out of the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. She has quite a case to tell us about, in which techniques were used that were not only compassionate, but effective. Alexis, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you so much, Robin.
It's so nice having a member of a feminist dynasty here, because, of course, your mom, Brenda Feigen, is a feminist attorney, is an author, and is one of the originals of contemporary feminism. And so we go back way to when you were a small, tiny feminist, and now it's so terrific that you've become the Mariska Hargitay of the fighting for special victims as a prosecutor.
Well, thank you so much, and what a compliment, and I'm so proud of my mother, and I'm so grateful to be here.
I want to talk to you about a case that you recently were involved in, and it's, I think, a model for how this thing should be done in the future. This was where about the techniques developed of fostering trust in a special victim, and the incredibly creative use of Skype so that the victim did not have to be in the same room testifying with the perpetrator. Talk about the case.
So we were handling a case that had been prosecuted in Los Angeles County. The defendant had begun trafficking this particular teenager who was 15 years old in San Francisco, and he had driven her down to Los Angeles, and crimes had happened in both jurisdictions, including sodomy and intercourse, and all of these are child molest crimes because she was a minor and he was certainly not. And he also sold her for sex in both San Francisco and Los Angeles. Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office prosecuted the case, and this particular teenage girl had some mental health issues, had a specialized education plan, and a few other mental health issues. And her guardian, her grandmother, was very protective over her, and understandably so, and did not want her to testify in Los Angeles. So while California law allows you to get through the first contested hearing that requires testimony without having a victim testify, so it's such that a police officer can testify and speak for the victim. At trial, that is not so. And so in Los Angeles, they got through that preliminary hearing, having the reporting officer speak for the victim. But then when they were looking at trial, the guardian, who had a lot of interaction with the therapists for this victim, the guardian just really put her foot down because this victim was suicidal, and at the mere thought of the mention of having to face her abuser and her pimp in court, she threatened suicide.
Yeah.
And what happened was we had a hold on him. Interestingly, he had also trafficked an adult female in San Diego County, but because he lived here, he was convicted there of trafficking an adult, and because he lived here, his probation was transferred to San Francisco. So when Los Angeles had to dismiss this case, we put a hold on him because he had violated the law and thereby violated his probation.
I see.
He was brought up here, and we proceeded with a probation violation hearing. And what I did was I just started from square one, looked at the case, and tried to, with the help of my victim witness advocate and also a police inspector from San Francisco, develop a relationship with this victim and her guardian. There were a lot of phone calls between the victim witness advocate and the grandmother, and a lot of emails and phone calls between my office and the therapists for the victim. And she was about 3 hours away from here. We arranged to drive up and meet with her and just see her face to face and really just let her know that we cared. The primary goal was not to sit there and prepare her for court, but just to talk to her about how she was doing and what was going on. And so we did that, and I think it meant a lot to her grandmother as well that we actually went to see her, and
of course.
that sort of changed the course of things for us. And also the therapists, we worked with them to find out what sort of situation could work for her. And what we concluded was that if she did not have to sit in the same courtroom as this defendant when testifying, she might be able to get through it. And I made a motion after having met with her. I made a motion to have her testify. It's sort of an outdated penal code section because it refers to testimony through closed circuit television, which isn't what's happening these days.
Right. The technology has changed, but the meaning is the same.
Exactly. What was also interesting is that had this been an open case, the law would have required me, an open case meaning what Los Angeles was dealing with. We were dealing with a probation violation. Los Angeles was dealing with an actual open case where he was facing new charges based solely on this conduct, and yet we were dealing only with a probation violation.
I see.
And so our standard of proof is a little bit lower. And had it been an open case, I actually would have had an extra element to prove. And I couldn't prove that element, which involved, had she been threatened by this defendant such that if she came to court or cooperated with law enforcement, he would have done harm to her or her family member, or had he used a gun during the crime, I would have needed to prove either of those things in order to accomplish her being able to testify from a separate room.
Oh my God, it's so unrealistic because he doesn't have to.
Right.
But never mind. I'm talking justice, and you're talking law.
Well, but because she did have special needs, and we were able to establish that with documentation from her therapist, because she was a minor, and because this was a probation violation hearing, this judge allowed me to have her testify from a different room. And what our technology department developed was a Skype setup, such that she was sitting in the adjoining room, and all of us were Skyping with her.
Wow.
And that I could ask her questions, the defense attorney could ask her questions, the judge could rule, each attorney could object, she could see all of it, and we could see and hear her, and it was interactive.
And she testified.
she did testify, and she was able to get through it, and his probation was revoked, and he did receive the maximum penalty, which was in place the year that he was convicted in San Diego County.
Congratulations. And after the hearing, you told me that she was proud of herself for standing up to him.
She was. After the hearing, I saw her in the back alleys of the courtroom because she was very concerned about coming to court, and she'd had basically a police escort, and we didn't want the defendant to see, where she was going.
Right.
And I ran after her. I think she'd forgotten something, or her therapist needed to get her some medication, and I said that she had done a great job, and she turned around and she had this little sort of humble smile on her face, and I could tell that she felt good that she had stood up to him, because he'd really shamed her and abused her and made her feel so hurt and vulnerable, and that was in and of itself, I think, just a victory for her.
And for you, Alexis. I mean, was this the first time that Skype had been used in this context?
It was the first time in our building here in San Francisco, I believe, that Skype had been used. I
mean, this whole process of developing trust with the victim and the extra miles, literally, that you went to do that, and as well as the concept of closed circuit, now Skype technology. Is this catching in other departments around the country? Is this or is this fairly unique to California?
Well, the penal code sections that I didn't quite meet, but that are there for our use, are California penal code sections. But I do suspect that in other states that there's similar sections.
If people use them.
Right. Ours are designed for minor victims, child victims, and they are also designed for victims with special needs, primarily. And there is certainly reference to crimes like child molest in both sections.
Right.
So I would imagine that there are similar statutes in other states.
It's something that should be looked into, and I want to talk with people at a national level who might know, and the National Lawyers Guild and so forth, because it should be used. These techniques certainly should be used more frequently, and I would love to see them, although that may require changes in the penal code and in the law. And I would like to see them used with adult women who can be just as terrorized and terrified as minors.
Yes.
But there's a long way to go to get that done. But we might as well start. Alexis, it's an absolute joy to talk with you, and I congratulate you. And it's so awesome to see how wonderfully you have grown up and into this powerful, terrific, strong defender of women. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Robin. I'm so happy to be here. What an honor to have been invited, and it's wonderful to speak with you.
We have to take a short break here. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I'm Robin Morgan. And when we return, we'll hear from a mild-mannered author who wanted to write about bullying and ways of combating it, and then had to face down a bit of bullying herself. We'll be back in just a minute.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back. Meg Medina has a vision of bringing more and more multicultural voices to enrich the universe of young adult literature. She wants to help bicultural Hispanic teens, Latinas in particular, keep and grow their identity by encountering people who sound and look like them in the pages of books. This started because she wanted to deal with bullying, and then that led to And then that led to, well, you'll hear. Here's Meg Medina. Meg, welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks so much.
Now, what have you done to be so controversial? It seems to me that the work that you do in young adult literature universe, and particularly in terms of young Latinas and in terms of them standing up for themselves and empowerment through literature, I mean, all of that seems so sensible, and yet not only have you been had many awards bestowed on you, you were banned by other people. So what's going on?
Well, I think some of it has to do with talking about the problem honestly. Of course, the book is Yaqui Delgado Wants to Kick Your Ass, and the word ass is like a lightning rod for some people. That was really, I think, the thing that made teachers and librarians queasy at the beginning. I wasn't actually banned. What happened is that I was disinvited to a school, and ironically, they were doing an assembly program for their middle and high school students about bullying.
Huh.
And my book, of course, focuses on the story of a young Latina, Piedad Sanchez, who finds herself in the crosshairs of a bully. So they were very uncomfortable with the word. They were concerned that it didn't, quote unquote, reflect the values of their community.
I see.
Which I thought was really interesting, since bullying really knows no boundaries in terms of ethnicity or economics or anything like that.
Well, it's the old problem of we live with the problem, and then when somebody names it, we get upset at the naming.
Exactly, and that's especially true for bullying girls.
Mm-hmm.
I had made a trailer to go with the book, and one of the slides in the trailer featured the words that are usually used to bully girls, and those words are always about sexuality,
of course,
about how loose or they are, etc.
Yeah.
And there's no defense against that, right? They're used because they're so powerful, because they're humiliating and they create shame. And that was, I think, the tipping point. They said, no, you can't come. But the other side of it is that there's nothing that gets dedicated librarians more on fire than banning a book or blocking young people from having access to ideas.
Aren't they wonderful? They are. They are the front line against the right wing, and they have this reputation of, oh, well, that's just a mousy librarian. They can kick your ass. They are just great. So they came to in fact, they've awarded you prizes.
They did. They came to my defense. Judy Blume came to my defense. Ellen Hopkins came to my defense. Wonderful people came to my defense. And I ended up winning the Pura Bel Prey Prize, which is awarded annually for a work of fiction that represents a Latino experience, most honorably celebrates it and so on. And I was really grateful for that, because the story is so much deeper than this word ass. It's about how young women find identity. It's about how you dig deep around and get out of the hole of shame that bullies will make for you. And for Latina girls in particular, that can really be difficult.
And so the book was called Yaqui Delgado Wants to Kick Your Ass, but many things grew out of that book. I mean, the Girls of Summer. Tell us about the Girls of Summer.
Yes, I've been doing Girls of Summer now. It will be its 4th year. A fellow author, Gigi Amato, and I pick 18 books for strong girls every summer. We started this project when our own daughters were getting ready to leave for college, and we realized how heavily we had each leaned on books to help raise them, and really to help us be their mothers in a way that was sensible and encouraged conversation. So we picked these 18 books that celebrate the journey of moving from being a girl to a woman, and they're picture books all the way to high school. And it's girlsofsummerlist.wordpress.com. And every Friday a new author comes and chats with us about how they found their story. And they're just fantastic books, not only current ones. Sometimes they're oldies but goodies, but they're the ones that resonate with us, that really celebrate what it is to be resilient.
That sounds fantastic. Say it again. Say the website again.
www.girlsofsummerlist.wordpress.com.
And
if you just put in Girls of Summer, you'll get images of bikini-clad girls.
Oh, we don't want that.
Very unfortunate.
No, we want Girls of Summer lists. That's what we want, yes.
Correct.
And you're also working with Reforma, which is an American Library Association affiliate that promotes Spanish language and Latino-focused materials in libraries.
Yes, they're lovely. They help sponsor the Pura del Prey Prize. And when I won, what I decided to do was to use the year that I have this medal as an opportunity. Every year, the needle doesn't move on the number of multicultural books that are published. It's usually around 3% of all the books published are by or about a Latino.
Oh, that's appalling.
It is appalling, and it doesn't reflect who's in the seats in our classrooms. So I contacted them and I said to them, this year my focus is to really talk about that issue and to introduce myself to Latino students and schools with high Latino populations and to schools where there isn't a high Latino population, to really talk about universal stories for children and why it's important that we offer up stories where people of all colors, all races, have the lead in the story.
That's right. Yeah. My one children's book, which is called A Book for Children and Other Adults. That's its that's its subtitle.
That's a good one.
Because what the hell? Which I wrote for my son when he was 8 years old. Has a triracial heroine, and it never occurred to me not to have a girl as the lead focus, and that she would not be, you would not go snowblind when you looked at her. Just in terms of reflecting the world's population, and also because of the plot of the story. But it's appalling because the Latino community is the fastest growing community in the country.
Correct. And yet we have this needle that won't move. So, and there are wonderful, wonderful places to get ideas. Certainly you could look at the Pura del Prey list of winners from years past. You can look at the Americas Awards. I am fond also of the Jane Addams Award. They just announced their list a couple of days ago, and it includes a nice multicultural list. And of course, the Amelia Bloomer list, which lists, of course, books that celebrate feminist girls, strong, healthy, resilient girls.
And what about you? Are you writing another book yet? Soon?
I am. I have a novel set in 1977 in New York City, and anyone who survived that knows it was a hot, crazy time. Son of Sam, of course, was on the streets, but more, it was feminism was on the rise, and it was a crazy time, a crazy, wonderful, scary time to grow up. So I've put my character, Nora Lopez, in the middle of all of that that year. And it's been exciting. It's been fun to go back, some days sad, because it is hard to grow up at a time where the earth is shifting underneath you and where violence is really at arm's length. But we do grow through that. We do survive that and come out on the other side. So I'm enjoying that journey.
And when is that due out? Do we know yet?
That I'm hoping will be 2016. What's coming out next year for me is a picture book called Abuela, Mango, and Me, which is about a grandmother who doesn't speak English, a girl who doesn't speak Spanish, and their parrot. That helps.
Oh, my God. Will you promise to come back when each of these books comes out and tell us about them?
I'd love to. I love this podcast, so it would be really fun to speak with you again.
That sounds absolutely great. Thank you so much, Meg, for all this work that you're doing. It's really great work. And remember to go to the website, and remember to add Girls of Summer lists. Thanks again.
Robin.
Thanks for being with us today on Women's Media Center Live.
Thanks so much.
And when you hear this music, you will know that now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. I'm looking at an item from the Associated Press from Stockholm that 9 women in Sweden have successfully received transplanted wombs donated from relatives in an experimental procedure. This has raised some ethical concerns. The women will soon try to become pregnant. So far, no go. These are women who were born without a uterus or had it removed because of cervical cancer. In many European countries, including in Sweden, having a surrogate carry a pregnancy is not allowed. So for these women, this might have been the only option other than adoption. There have been 2 previous attempts to transplant wombs in Turkey and Saudi Arabia, but both failed to produce any babies. Scientists in Britain, Hungary, and elsewhere are also planning similar experiments. The 9 womb recipients have been doing well. Many already had periods 6 weeks after the transplants, which is a sign that the wombs are functioning. The transplant operations did not connect the uteruses to their fallopian tubes, however, so they can't get pregnant naturally. But all of them, before the operation, had some eggs removed from their own ovaries, which they did have, and the eggs were used to create embryos through in vitro fertilization, and then the embryos were frozen, and the doctors planned to transfer the embryos into the new wombs, allowing the women to carry their own biological children. It's unknown whether the transplants will result in healthy children. The technique in Sweden is controversial because it uses live donors. In Britain, where doctors are also planning the experiments, they're planning to use wombs only from dying or dead people, which was also the case in Turkey, where the patient did get pregnant, but the pregnancy failed after 2 months. After a maximum of 2 pregnancies, they would do this with it. The wombs would be removed so the women can stop taking anti-rejection drugs, which have their own risks right up to certain types of cancer. Now, I have to say I'm conflicted about this, in part because it's sort of Frankensteinian, but also because it confuses a simple mind like mine as to why, in a planet that is already overpopulated and groaning, we keep devising new methods for new births instead of, using that scientific brain power to address feeding the children who are already on the planet. I do understand that for women who want to conceive their own biological children, this is a huge gain. And so, since I am a biological mother, maybe it's not my place to say. But it makes me nervous. It also makes me nervous because of sci-fi scenarios that there'll be some men who will suddenly want womb transplants so they can be women. And then they'll put women in zoos where we'll be used only for pornography. Those are in my darker moments. But basically, it makes me nervous. Usually when Sweden does something, it's so progressive, you just immediately applaud. This one, not so much. And possibly I am being wise to be nervous, and possibly I'm just being a fuddy-duddy. I'm not at all sure. At all. Which is why I put this in the surrealism corner. We have to take another short break here. This is Women's Media Center Live, and I am Robin Morgan. If you, like me, find yourself often wondering why, after so long, we still are fighting for full reproductive rights, this next segment will be of particular interest to you about the stigma attached to many reproductive rights issues.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
Welcome back again. If you, like me, often find yourself wondering how come, after so long, we still have to be fighting for full reproductive rights, This next segment will particularly interest you. One reason is that even when we win on the legislative front, we're in danger of losing ground on the legislative front because attitudes still haven't fully, deeply changed, or changed enough. So, this next segment is of particular importance. Kate Cockrill and Steph Herold are launching a new non-profit project called the Sea Change Program. They've done research into transforming the culture of stigma around abortion and other stigmatized reproductive experiences. Kate and Steph are two special women with some very special news. Kate and Steph, welcome to Women's Media Center Live.
Thanks for having us, Robin.
When you speak, identify yourselves so our listenership can know who's talking, but I want to hear from both Kate Cockrill and Steph Herold, who are the mothers, as it were, of the Sea Change Program. What is the Sea Change Program? How did it come to be? How did you sense the need for it and create this remarkable program?
Thanks. This is Kate. So we started this program based on some research that I had been conducting at the University of California at San Francisco. And Steph actually joined me as an intern a few years ago. Originally, we started with these research questions around what are women's opinions of abortion regulation. So we interviewed women who were accessing abortions in the Midwest and South, and we just encountered a bunch of social and emotional aspects of abortion that we weren't really getting at in our research around the ways that policy and regulation infringe on women's ability to access abortion. There were all these other things coming up. And so our name actually came originally from the fact that we were studying SEAA, the social and emotional aspects of abortion. So C, we called it the C program. You see us up.
And all the while I was thinking that you picked it up from The Tempest, from Shakespeare's The Tempest.
I know. Well, but I think that's a really excellent point, because as we started to explore the cultural and social elements of abortion, the social and emotional elements of abortion, and how women were experiencing it in their own lives, and how abortion providers were experiencing those elements of their abortion experience, and even how advocates were, we began to realize that there was this thing that everyone was experiencing called stigma. Mm-hmm. And stigma is something that's been studied, around many other minority social experiences, such as mental illness and having HIV/AIDS, and being queer and obesity. There were many other places in which the stigma research had really taken off, and where organizations and individuals and researchers were finding exciting avenues for change. And so that's kind of where the change came. When we started developing programs to really address the stigma, not just to study what it was, then we changed our name to the Sea Change Program.
Wow. This is very important, because I remember when we first started challenging abortion, even just abortion reform, although we as young radical feminists wanted complete abortion repeal, but other parts of the movement wanted reform. And we didn't want to mention the word abortion. We said pregnancy termination. We said, we euphemized it as much as possible.
Yeah, what I would say is that's a way that people manage stigma. That, when you live in a culture where abortion, there's sort of a shared understanding that abortion is morally or socially reprehensible, then you're always in conversation with that shared understanding. You're always in conversation with that stigma. The thing that always comes to mind is you get on an airplane because you're going to a meeting, and you sit down next to the person, and you're making niceties and learning about each other, and the person says, "What do you do for a living?" And there's this moment, am I going to reveal that the work that I do and that I care about is around abortion? And I don't think it has to do with not believing that abortion care is moral or good work.
Mm-hmm.
You're just operating in a situation where you don't know the perception of the person that you're talking to.
Right.
And that's your own question, your own humanity in a very serious way could be called into question in that conversation.
What a different culture we would live in if you could feel immediately proud to say, I save women's lives. I work in an abortion clinic, or I'm an advocate for abortion.
Right, exactly, right. And this is Steph. And we really think that understanding abortion stigma can help us clarify so many questions that the reproductive health rights and justice movement has been asking for years.
Mm-hmm.
Things like, why is abortion so hard to talk about? Why does getting an abortion sometimes feel illicit or shameful? Or why do people feel guilty for not feeling guilty about having an abortion?
Yeah.
Why don't we hear about the experiences of our mothers, sisters, and friends? Why does it feel like, securing our reproductive rights is a never-ending uphill battle? So these are all the questions that we have in our minds when we're designing our program.
You have really cut to the core of the issue, because if you change, we're now talking about rape culture, and you're talking about stigma culture or a shame culture, which is more severe in certain parts of the world in general, shame culture. But the shame culture in terms of the stigma around abortion and reproductive rights itself in parts of this country is still very severe. So what do we do about that? What does the Sea Change program recommend?
This is Kate. That's a really great question. And I actually love what you just said, shame culture. That is exactly, that's a very succinct way of putting the work that we're doing around stigma, that we do. We live in a shaming culture. So in terms of figuring out what we do, I think that, our first step was really trying to figure out what is this?
Mm-hmm.
Because people experience stigma in so many different ways. Some women experience it as negative attitudes that they feel towards themselves, right? And some women experience it as perceptions of negative attitudes in people in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
But all of these perceptions have implications for the way that people behave. So what we have thought about doing is, one of the ways that it's been shown to be very effective for changing stigmatizing attitudes is to put people who don't have experience with abortion, for example, in contact with people who have experienced abortion. Mm-hmm. And that these contacts often do the work of changing attitudes.
We're storytellers, our species, and if that story can get into the heart, it does more than all the rhetoric in the world.
That's been shown this is Kate, this has been shown time and time again in research around stigma, that contact is just this really important strategy. Mm-hmm. But the tricky part is that it's a very difficult thing to create opportunities for contact around something that people can keep secret. Yeah. So one of the things that we would see is our research has been survey research with women who have had abortions as well as interview research. And one of the stories that would come out of the interview research that I always thought was interesting is a young woman or a woman in her 20s or 30s is getting an abortion. And, it's a scary time because she's, accessing care for the first time through a facility she's not familiar with, and she needs someone to go with her. Oftentimes she talks to her mom. Mm-hmm. And in a couple of these circumstances with these interviewees, the woman would say, and then I found out that my mom had an abortion. Right? Typically, once that young woman knew about her mother's abortion, it really shifted the way that she was thinking about herself, the fear that she had about the healthcare encounter. So in our program, we're thinking, how do we increase the likelihood that people are going to be hearing about abortion from other women in their lives, women and men in their lives who have gone through it. Mm-hmm. So we designed a study to look at how we could use book clubs as a way to open up these conversations about abortion. Mm. We measured the attitudes that women in book clubs hold about abortion before they read a book. And then we also, about many different pregnancy experiences, including abortion. And then we observed their conversation, and we measured their attitudes immediately after participating in this conversation with one another, mm-hmm. and then 4 months later. And then we also looked at, of the women who were in these groups, who had had abortions themselves, or who had experienced infertility, or who experienced miscarriage, or any other pregnancy experience that may be difficult to share, were they able to or willing to share these experiences in their book clubs? And two really interesting things happened. One is that women disclosed their pregnancy experiences to one another, whether it was miscarriage or infertility and abortion. Women were really willing to talk about their abortions. Of the 19 women in this sample who had had abortions, 15 shared their abortion stories with their book clubs in the context of discussing this book.
Wow.
Opening up the conversation, to other people in the book club.
Well, you've hit the payload. It's like consciousness raising. It's when women tell the truth about their lives, it's just magic.
Really what we found in doing a qualitative analysis was that public conversations of abortion and private conversations about abortion are very different, right? In the public conversation, in the media and in politics, we see a really polarizing atmosphere. We see people who are pro-choice and pro-life, and that is really the dichotomy that we see. Whereas in these private conversations where people are open and curious and willing to listen to each other, they know each other, they're friends, they're really able to talk about their experiences with a lot of nuance. And we also found that people who have abortions aren't the only ones who have these experiences with abortion. A lot of women have taken friends to a clinic, and that's how they've experienced abortion in their lives. A lot of them have considered what it would be like to have an abortion, either in a current pregnancy, a future pregnancy, a past pregnancy. A lot of women have thought about abortion as an issue that they would have to deal with when they found out their doctor wasn't supportive of abortion.
Right.
So I think we have a lot of work to do in figuring out how to bring people who haven't necessarily had an abortion themselves, but have experienced abortion in some other area of their life into the conversation and really engage their experiences.
Wow. Is there a website for the Sea Change program?
SeaChangeProgram.org, and we're also on Twitter and on Facebook.
Thank you for the work that you do, both of you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
We'll take one more quick break. This is Women's Media Center Live still, and I am still, expectably, Robin Morgan. And when we come back, we'll come back with fighting words. So don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio.
And we're back again in time for Fighting Words. Back to Nigeria, yes. We have to ask ourselves how it could take so long for the global North mass media to understand that this was a story that was happening. It took more than 1 million tweets on Twitter and outcries through various advocacy organizations before finally the New York Times ran an editorial bringing this to the attention of the global North. Well, the answer, I'm afraid, is deplorably simple. First of all, it's an African story. And Africa, oh dear God, ho-hum, it's always in such deep suffering and chaos. Change the channel, turn the page. What's more, it's a story about African women. Even worse, African women are always in a state of acute suffering. They're always either morbidly obese in the way they're depicted from poverty diseases, or they're morbidly skin and bones from HIV/AIDS, and they're always clutching babies with swollen, bloated bellies from starvation and with flies on their eyes. Turn the page. Change the channel. The leader of Boko Haram, the psychotic thug, recently released a video in which he harangues the world for caring. He's astonished that anybody should be so loud and make such a fuss over just girls. Well, the strange thing is, he's not so different from the white male heads and directors of the 6 companies that control our media. That's Comcast, Disney, News Corp, CBS, Viacom, and Time Warner. I'll say them again. Comcast, Disney, Murdoch's News Corp, CBS, Viacom, and Time Warner. They control our news. They often have one person at a story editor's desk in Africa, in an African country. So they're not about to cover the story that's going on even right now, which is that these are not little girls, not 4 and 5 and 7. These are girls between ages 12 and 16. They are impregnable. Yeah, think about that. Think about the fact that they probably already have been raped, maybe repeatedly. Think about the fact that if you become pregnant in northern Nigeria, it's almost tantamount to a death sentence because the maternal mortality rate is so high, as is the rate of HIV/AIDS. So if and when these girls ever become freed or rescued or in a prisoner exchange, whatever, some of them be dead from mass rapes. Some of them be dead from pregnancy or childbirth. Others will have a child, being a child themselves, and they will be HIV positive, and all of them will have been traumatized for life. But that's maybe not a story. Change the channel. Turn the page. Nor is it only in Nigeria. In Afghanistan, a failed state, an 18-year-old just recently ran away from home to escape a failed marriage. By the way, it's illegal to run away from home. Well, actually, it's not illegal. There's a law nowhere on the books. But if you do so, even though at 18 you are not a minor any longer, you are sentenced as a woman to a year in prison. Anyway, she ran away to avoid an arranged marriage, and her parents tracked her to a woman's shelter where she was beginning a new life and convinced the police and even the shelter that she should go back home with them. They even made a video promising that she would not be harmed, and they lodged the video with the Bureau of Women's Affairs, but you know what? She never made it home. 150 cases of honor killings take place in Afghanistan a year, and that's while there's still a modicum of U.S. presence there. And then, of course, there's India, which is not a failed state, which is the world's largest democracy, which is decidedly a place where civil society reigns, except that it concerns women not so much. A New Delhi court has just ruled that sex between a husband and wife, quote, even if forcible, is not rape, close quote. That's a democracy. There are days when the despair hits, and it's important to acknowledge it. And right now, I'm realizing all over again something that I first understood in the late 70s, which is that we are at war. Not just a war on women in the rhetorical sense that we use the term about the Republicans in this country, although that's also true, and it's part of it. But a real war, a war against our lives for standing up and saying we demand to be treated as full human beings. And I don't know what we do to find ourselves at that war. We don't have armies, we don't have munitions, we've said we don't want them. I'm not sure that's true anymore. I know I want women to stay alive. I don't know the answer, I'm working on it, you work on it too. But all I know is it's important to understand the moments of despair so that we can go on from them. We are at war. And we need to do whatever we need to do to fight back. Fight back. Fight back. And that's it for this week. You've been listening to us on CBS Radio WJFK 1580 AM, or you've been visiting us at WMCLive.com for this and a whole archive of all our previous episodes. Also, be sure to find WMC Live at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton. Senior Producer, Crystal Williams Chancellor. And our founding sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan. Thank you for being with us. Join us next week when our guests will include the woman who is creating a women's studies miracle. In Georgia yet. We'll also hear from the social scientist whose statistics prove, for one thing, that prostituted women suffer PTSD at a higher rate than soldiers in combat. And we'll talk with a woman who demands that the dry, rhetorical abstractions of public policy translate into real support for real women's real lives. Meanwhile, look for us on Facebook and Twitter for alerts about exclusive breaking news segments, surprise upcoming guests, and future shows. Only here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on 1580 CBS Radio and WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.